working with Mary Tyler Moore. Personally and professionally, what was that like, and what kind of role on the set did she provide?
Mary Tyler Moore was an absolute angel to work with. And she was very like the character of Mary, only, I would say, more sophisticated, more chic, more acerbic, more witty. Mary Richards was a bit of an innocent, and that part is, in Mary, but she was so generous with all of us. And you always got the feeling that she might have been captain of the team if it was a basketball team, but she was also a fellow player. It's like she would say things during rehearsal. Say, I don't think this joke is for me. I think it's a Rodel line. It's more what she would say, and she'd give away jokes. She would be very willing to have anything cut because it was in the way of the scene, and she taught me so many things about the technical part of doing the show. Like I explained earlier, shifting her weight or just finding out where a shot was, and if our hands were. She taught me things where we could save time and not have to reshoot something. She was real patient with Cloris, who was absolutely wonderfully creative to work with, and sometimes all over the place. I remember one day we did a whole scene, and Cloris said, "Oh no, this is my bad side." So Mary and I, she said, "Well, you have small noses, both of you," and we do. So we then redid the scene. Mary with nary a thing of star or how dare you or no. She was just a great team player, a great example, and so much fun. And I think of her on the set with needle pointing wildly, tons of things, with her glasses down on her nose and smoking, but refusing ever, like I said, to ever smoke on camera. She didn't want to perpetuate that particular evil. She was very, very funny. And it was a joy to come to work every day. She took a personal interest in all of us, and I can't tell you enough how much fun it was, and how supported I felt, and how, and people, she has a certain reserve, always has, but I always, I saw that bonfire inside of warmth and approachability, for me at least. Of course, I'm somebody that plows right through, You can be reserved, but I don't respect it. I just keep on coming.
Talk about working with Grant Tinker. What was that like?
Oh, Grant was great. Best looking man in the world. He had these incredible, we used to call him Mr. GQ, and that was when it was Gentleman's Quarterly. Very elegant, white and red or white and blue check shirts, perfect belt, casual, so cool, so supportive of the creative process. He was so supportive of Alan Burns and Jim Brooks. He would go to the mat fighting. At that time, they were independent producers, and they could really, if you had a good producer on the show, they could really stand up for the writers, and things wouldn't get changed arbitrarily. I think what's happened in the industry to a great degree is that people that don't know what they're doing have the final say. I know when I worked on Valerie and other television shows, I guess that was the 80s, things had shifted already, and this huge phalanx of people would come, all very young, not all, but on the young side, at the network, and it would be 30, 40 people. And as recently as, I just did Till Death with the fabulous Jolie Fisher and Brad Garrett, really wonderful performers. I played his mom, and all this huge people come to see the run-through. We didn't have that. It was, the network said, do it, you guys can write comedy, just go ahead. And they would give a huge order also. When Mary was on, they got 39 shows or some 36, some incredible amount. That was the whole season. And when we were down to 26. But Jim Brooks used to say, we could map out our season. We'd say, okay, we'll do 4 Lou, maybe 3 or 4 Rhoda, a couple of Phyllis, Murray or 2, and 3 Teds, and by that they meant Mary was always a star and had the lion's share, but it was a story about that emphasized that character or another. So it gave a shape and a continuity to the season, and it wasn't cookie cutter because you had a pool of actors to work with. So I think, I don't know, I'm off your question, darling. Jim, what was it again?
We were talking about Grant.
Oh yeah, Grant Tinker knew what he thought was good and would stand for it. There was a time when Rhoda, they didn't want her to be Jewish, and they thought she was too abrasive. And I know that Grant went to the mat saying that's the humor. That is the fun of her. She's a New Yorker. And they didn't want her mother, and they didn't want it to be, they were just, I was unlikable. That was it. That Rhoda was really so unlikable. She's being mean to Mary. And they said, yeah, that's theater, baby. That's the show. That people bumping into each other and making it work. I was supposed to be her nemesis. But then as the show went on, it got to be that I was her friend, but I could act like an enemy and say, that skirt looks terrible, or you get all the good guys, or I'm jealous of you, I hate your guts, look at you in those white pants. I mean, all those things that girlfriends do truly say to each other, but in the space of love. So Rhoda could be abrasive, New York, tough, insulting, but she loved Mary. And they didn't know that was what was going to happen. They wrote to the strengths of the actors. So I think Grant, he just provided such power. He'd say, I'll take the meeting, or he'd go in with Jim and Alan and not let them, as creative people, be beaten down.
Did you interact with the writers much?
No. Oh, yeah. Yes, I did, but it wasn't writing. I would say, could I say this? For instance, I started calling her, I knew it was a New York thing, a friend of mine did this, so I thought it might be fun to call her Kid, because Rhoda felt inferior to Mary. Rhoda wished she was Mary. Rhoda looked up to her, and so all I could do is not being as pretty or as thin or as accomplished was, I'm a New Yorker, and I am going to straighten this shiksa out, and I am going to just so you know who you are. Hey, kid. It was endearing, but it was also, what's the word? Demonizing. It's making her a junior partner, just a little. And they loved it, so they started writing Kid. But that's not writing. I don't consider that writing. That was just something that came up in, and we used to do a thing that they called a trail off, because Mary would say, at the end of a scene, the scene would be, oh, I didn't think of that. And then I would just start saying, well, you should think of that, because you should have thought of that, because that's what a friend does. They think of those things. I mean, whatever it was. And she said, but I didn't. And we would improvise. Mary was a great improviser. And we'd do this, and we did that. You see it still on several shows, if they're not cut up too much for reruns. So in that respect, we did. Or I would come up with something that I thought was, interesting. Or one day I remember Jim saying, I had just opened in Story Theater with the fabulous Mary Fran, who was in a show. The one show we did that was kind of edgy in terms of a cause. It was that Rhoda was Jewish,
yes,
and couldn't get into the country club. And Jim afterwards, I remember saying, "This isn't our show. They can do this on Maude. They should do it on All in the Family. We're about people coping with each other. We're like a non-familial family." And that's our best thing. This is not our. But I think the show was good, and I think it did work. But I remember. I don't know why. Oh, Mary Fran. Yeah. We were pals because we were doing Story Theater together. An opening night of Story Theater at the Mark Taper Forum, which went on to win Tony Awards and so forth. That was that was the Second City people. That was 1970. And I was opening in the show, and I was also doing the Mary Tyler Moore Show. And the Mark Taper Foreign, Gordon Davidson gave me off Friday nights to shoot. So I would work all day and rehearse, and then I'd go down there and play the show at night. I was doing both for a while. And I remember Mary, opening night, there was a Mexican dinner. That was what we had. So we're standing there, Mary and I, both ample hips, both of us. Not fat, but round. And I more than she. And we're taking these food, piling it high, as you do at an opening night party, because you've just given your all, and then you eat for 20 firemen. Okay, so she sits it down, and she said, Val, I don't know why I'm bothering to take this very pretty peach napkin, spread it out, lower the plate, pick up this lovely silver, eat, chew, swallow, and then wait. What did she say? And then wait 40, and then no. She said, instead of waiting 48 hours to digest, I should just take this whole plate and apply it directly to my hips. Well, I almost fell off the couch laughing. I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. And weeks later, maybe months, there was an opening of one show, and Jim, they were always writing up to the last minute to make it better. Not huge things, because the show was always well written and in good shape, but to give it a next little zest, a thing, some kind of liven it up, a better joke. They'd say, try this joke, and we'd do it several times, and sometimes we'd go back to the original. And he said, that opening scene, Val, we need a joke. We need something. You're just sitting there on the desk in the office. And then I said, Mary Fran said the funniest thing to me at the opening night. And I told him the story. He said, oh, that's great, but we can't have Mexican food. Let us think about it. So they went back to the market. They cut down the whole joke to simply, and that's a brilliant comedy writer, that she could have some candy, a box of candy, chocolates on her desk. And I pick one up and say, I don't know why I'm bothering to eat this. I should just apply it directly to my hips. Alan Burns has told me it is one of the most repeated jokes of all the millions of fabulous jokes they wrote. And it was Mary Fran. It was one girlfriend to another talking about our hip measurement and why we should, give it up. We're gonna wear this in 48 hours. Might as well just do it now. And that's where that line came from. And God bless Mary in heaven, a dear friend. And it didn't happen on that show. She later on was brought on the show. In fact, everyone in Story Theater, they loved the actors. Peter Bonners, who later went on to do The Newhart. Paul Sand, they wrote him a pilot, and he was on our show twice. Dick Shaw, my husband at the time, did many, many Marys in many. They just kept writing stuff and having him come back. He played twin brothers. It was incredible. Dick Libertini, Hamilton Camp played the little short, very attractive guy. Mary met him sitting down, and he stood up, and she was 3 heads taller than he, but they already had made a date. Was it Toulouse-Lautrec was one of my favorite authors. That was the name of the show. They wrote great titles that never really appeared. But in retrospect, I think, and now this time of DVDs and archives, everybody will know what they named them. And they were always charming comedy things. But all those people that were in the show, and Mary as well, almost all of them did the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Talk about working with Jay Sandrich. What was that like?
Oh, heaven. Absolutely fabulous. And Jay always created this very terrific atmosphere but kept total control. He kept the boundaries clear and kept our focus on the work, but we had the most wonderful political conversations in between on breaks. He knew how to recreate in the best sense of that word. Recreation is not necessarily badminton, but the root of it is to recreate. And it's to recreate yourself, and he had a knack for that. And he knew the cameras inside and out. He did his homework. He was always so prepared, and he had wonderful taste. And he'd say a little too much, or you're punching too hard, or you can lay back, or put that one out there more. You can put a little more English on the ball. In other words, for a joke to work. He's now a very close friend. Which happened in the last 10, 15 years. I mean, we were always friends, but then we kind of reconnected, and now we see each other. He and Linda, his wife, and Tony and I are close. But he was just he completely had control of the technical, which could overpower some directors. And then he really worked with us and could work with us at length, but always in that time constraint, getting us the best possible bang for the buck in terms of the rehearsal buck. Do you know what I mean? In other words, you only have so much time, and to use it judiciously, creatively, and preparing the actors. And he got to know all of us, and he said, and people would say, what's Valerie doing? She's fumbling around. He said, she'll be there. When the lights come on Friday night, don't worry. She's finding things. He knew how all of us worked. And as a director of 6 or 8, in a continual vehicle like a situation comedy, that's very important. And I think he's wonderful. I think it's no wonder he went on to do Cosby and all these other wonderful shows and movies and anything he wants to do. He's been doing theater recently, and I encourage that as well. He's just a terrific director and a lovely man.
Talk about shooting the pilot. What was that week like?
I was in a fog of my own, just learning my lines and understanding what all these men were doing there behind cameras. It was massive amount of people. I'd only worked in the theater. And so I didn't realize they did one show, and I found out in retrospect that they hated the first show. It didn't work, and they went back to the drawing board and did it again with some changes in the writing. I don't know if you... I'd rather have other people talk about this because I wasn't in those meetings, but I understand that they didn't understand Rhoda, they didn't like her, there was several things. And Marge Mullen, the script supervisor, happened to be in a meeting, and she said, you know what, if they don't like Rhoda, have Bess like Rhoda. Have the 10-year-old, between 9 and 11, little girl with braids. Have her like Rhoda, and then we'll know it's okay. And then Phyllis can be, for instance, I think in that she said, the little kids, Mary asked Phyllis something, and the little one blurts it out. And she said, Beth, that was mother's news. So you know this is a mother in trouble. And that dumb, awful Rhoda. And instead of leaving it with Phyllis's line, that dumb, awful Rhoda, Beth said, I like Aunt Rhoda. She said, she's not your aunt. So right in that way, it's excellent writing. In 2 lines, you get a whole other aspect. So suddenly the kid likes Rhoda, so maybe there's something lovable there behind this being evil to Dick Van Dyke's wife. Do you know what I mean? Because that's how people knew her and loved her, as Laura Petrie. So I came in and was tough with her and kicking her out of a place and saying, who's this brash, horrible New York broad? So I think that was one of the changes they made. They made some other changes. I would rather you archive them and find out. I heard this from Jim and from Alan, and also I've heard from Jay that it was Black Tuesday or something, whatever night it was. We shot the show, and it was just like, ugh. And they went back to the drawing board again. The fabulous Grant Tinker stepped up and said, I don't know what he did monetarily. If he said, I'll pay for the other show. I don't know any of that. That's why I'm loath to speak of it in great detail, except I know it was a big bomb. And I didn't know it. They never put it onto me. They never came and said you guys were awful or anything like that. I don't know which of the actors knew. Maybe some did, with more savvy about the way the business runs. I was a complete novice, and all I was worried about was getting my lines straight and making my changes as fast as possible.
Once the show got on the air, when did you know it was a hit? When did you sense it?
I guess people weren't looking at the number. I mean, I wasn't, looking at we're 33rd, we're this, we're that, they would say, and we had the whole season to do. We had, I think, 24 shows. It wasn't like 3 shows and hanging on by your white knuckles to see what the network's going to do. There were 26 shows in front of us. So I was just glad to have a job. All I wanted was work steady. I wanted a show that would run. I wanted to be in a play that didn't close opening night. Do you know what I mean? That's how I was thinking. I would love a job at this wonderful profession of acting that had some continuity. Who knew there would be 9 years? But I guess I got to know it when the Emmys came around. I guess the Emmy nominations. I thought that's good. I've watched this show for years, and I think that was it. When there were Emmy nominations and that we were coming back, and then people started recognizing me in the street. I did know it was funny and that the audience was laughing. I did know that, and that was exciting. The first night we did the show, I didn't feel any great sense of, they called it Black Tuesday or whatever they were calling, or a disaster, because I didn't know where the laughs were. Because for me, it was a first preview as a theater actress. Oh, we're going to do this and maybe it'll get better or they'll fix it or put in. I didn't know, but they never used canned laughter on that show, and shows before them and since have. And it's it was Lucy and Desi. You can't do comedy without human beings laughing, and God bless them for creating that format.
Let's talk about some specific episodes.
Sure.
One of the more famous ones early on was Support Your Local Mother.
Oh, yeah. That's when Nancy Walker as Ida Morgenstern. Yeah, that was terrific.
What was your relationship? What was Rhoda's relationship with her mother?
Just a pushing a Jewish mom who has all the best intentions, but over smothering her daughters, both of them. But Rhoda also felt she had disappointed her parents inside. She wanted to be married, and her mother saying, you should be married. I mean, it was just crazy making, because she wanted to find a guy. She wanted to have her life be that, storybook thing, Mr. Right. And her mother was there with that loving yet disapproving, and it was just that classic, what has become a classic mother-daughter conflict of an adult daughter, and they still treat you like a baby.
Rhoda she changed a lot through the years on The Mary Show.
Yes, she did.
On the episode Rhoda the Beautiful, we saw her sort of become more comfortable with herself.
Yes, except if you'll remember, she said she came in second. That's Treva Silverman. Most of my Emmy awards were written by Treva Silverman, because Treva really understood the mom-daughter and Rhoda very profoundly. And of course it was Jim Brooks and Alan Burns. You see, a writer would write a script, and then it would go through this wonderful crucible, this process of being in the writing room with Jim and Alan and Dave Davis and Lorenzo Music and the staff writers. And pretty soon, Treva was a staff writer. I don't know if she started out on staff. You'd have to ask the writers about that. But they were the first guys to bring on so many female writers. And Jim once said the most wonderful thing to me, which I really think crystallizes or, illustrates exactly where they were coming from. He said, Valerie, Alan and I don't do that, what did he call it? Nail polish and pantyhose stuff great. We just don't. I know there's a wealth of comedy in my wife's purse, but I can't access it. So we're going to get, some girls in here. And I said, great. And it was that not nascent, it's been going on for centuries, but it was a resurgence of the women's movement through the 60s. And here we were, 1970, and they were looking for, it's not that men can't write women and that women can't write men. In the history of literature and playwriting, we know that's not so. But there was an added wonderful point of view. For instance, the wedding gown, the bridesmaid's dress It was just a small part in one show where we both had these terrible things that looked like little Bo Peep. In fact, I make a joke to that effect. You just need a crooked thing and some sheep, and we're ready. But every girl knows that she crawled into an ugly dress for her girlfriend. We all kind of just know that. We've worn ugly stuff at our sisters' or cousins' or friends' weddings because one size does not fit all. And you have 12 girls or 8 girls or 4 girls that all have different bodies wearing the same gown to be bridesmaids. And it is a prescription for disaster, fashion disaster. So we kind of know that. And that was put into a show. And that's what Alan said. I would never have come up with that. Because it's not what straight, gay men, yes. You look at Sex and the City. That is written from a point of view, that fashion stuff and all that, gay men understand that in a way that straight men don't. Not that it's better writing or anything. It's just the shoes, having thousands of pairs of shoes. And it's all changed over the years. But I really think that they brought along female writers, Charlotte Brown, Sybil Edelman, Susan Silver. There was a whole lot of young women, Maureen McGowan, and the wonderful one with the 3 names. Wonderful Bloodworth, Thomas, yeah, Linda and her partner wrote for us, and just so many people. Because Jim and Alan wanted female writers to bring that other point of view of experience.
Rhoda's evolution led, of course, to your own show after 4 years.
Yes.
How did that come about?
Well, from the first year, Freddie Silverman, who was then head of the network, was saying, we're going to spin you off. And I thought I was being fired until I asked somebody what the term meant. And then I said, oh, no, I don't want. And then finally, the 4th year, Mary, I said, I don't want to go. I don't want to. She said, you don't want to be my sidekick all your life? I said, yes, I do. She said, oh, come on. I said, what if it fails? She said, if it fails, you'll move back to Minneapolis. And I'll have you back in my life again. And I thought, that's working with a net, isn't it? And Nancy Walker said to me the greatest thing in her understated way. I said, man, I don't know if I should leave. This is a very comfortable berth. I've won Emmys. It's fabulous. I know it. And she said, Valerie, it's a job. Take it. No glamour, glitz. It's a good job. Take it. And I'm glad I did.
Well, how did that show change your responsibilities?
Well, I was trying to channel Mary because I saw how she behaved as a star, and I wanted to do the same thing. Yeah, and be kind and simple and on time and trying my best. I don't know that I came up to her incredibly stalwart and, excellent level. But we had a very good time on that show. We had wonderful actors and the same people writing it. And then Charlotte Brown took it over and carried it on in the ensuing years. It was very similar, but just more responsibility. And it was great. I was very happy. I was very proud to be on the cover of Time magazine. That was fun. The Funny Girls, it was called, and it was Mary and me.
Was there a sense of ownership as starring in your own show?
No, just more lines to learn. I felt ownership at Mary Tyler Moore. Do you know what I mean? In terms of owning what I had, that I was responsible for the whole scene. That's the way, it's a good, I guess I got this from the S training. It's if you approach life or a project that you're responsible for the whole thing. It doesn't mean you're running into people's business and I'm telling the cameraman that he really should put the camera this way or that. That I don't mean. It's just that you are responsible for the space in which we're working and whatever you can do to contribute to it. I haven't been any saint. I've been probably difficult at times or short-tempered or I don't know. I'm just a human being like everyone else. But when the play's the thing, when the work is the focus, when the show, it's all for the show, it's a very unifying thing. That's why you hear people on awards shows saying, oh, we're a family, they're the best in the world, we're all, and it really gets to be that way. Because you include any loggerheads or difficulties or sadness, bad things happen to people, you lose somebody, or, that all is included. You're rehearsing and there's an earthquake and everybody runs outside. All those experiences go into the whole. And I felt, you know, it was just more work. It was more work.
The show was instantly successful, instantly popular.
Because it was a continuation of the Mary Tyler Moore Show and of Rhoda's, you know, and they came to me and said, Val, shall we pop you on the air married? We can do that. Or we can let the audience, you know. And then it was, I think, Alan or Jim, they both said, you know, we'd love to do, you meet, and then you have a date, and you ask him out, and I say, thank you, Gloria Steinem, because I asked Joe out. Do you want to go to dinner sometime? Because he was this cute guy. And then going forward, and then do you want to live together? And then I can't do that. And then the proposal show, and then the shower show, and we're 8 shows in, and then was the wedding, which was probably my favorite show because it was both cast together, and it was an hour. That was great. That was great fun. We had a great time that week.
How did you feel about the development that Rhoda was going to be married so soon into the show?
Oh, I thought that was fine because we'd seen her for 4.5 years single, and she wanted to get married. And they wanted to write a modern marriage. The problem with the show, looking back, hindsight is 2020, they wanted to write Mad About You, but it was early. Mad About You was in the 80s, right? And it was a real modern marriage. That's what they were trying to write. But we still had people saying he's got to have a pajama top, or, you know, or I don't know if they can be in the same bed. They should be in. Now, the twin beds were over, but just barely. Do you know what I mean? And they wrote very skillfully. I used to call them over the head, those kind of jokes, where I remember, it was a show, I think, where Mary and I live together, the odd couple. And it doesn't work out. And the fireman at the end comes in, and Rhoda's apartment burns, and while it's being refurbished, she moves in with Rhoda. Then she goes back, and then I said, you know, Mary, I think I'm not going to wait for the apartment to be ready. I'm going to move to a motel. And Phyllis's line was, well, Rhoda dear, it won't be the first time. And that's funny. You're smiling. I would smile. We laugh. Adults laugh. But the kids can hear it. Children can hear it, and they're not harmed in any way. That's one of those jokes that's smart enough for the adults, and if you're old enough to understand it, then you can hear it. But if you don't get it, it won't be the first time she's been to a motel. You know, that was the way they wrote, and it was wonderful.
Why do you think Rhoda's wedding resonated the way it did?
Because everybody was pulling for her to get married. And then there's this disaster where Phyllis forgets to pick her up. And you mean the roll up to it where there were wedding parties? We got toasters, Jim. We got wedding presents. I have silver plaques and things that were sent, trays, and the toasters were the funniest because that was a de rigueur, 1950s, 1960s. You sent married couples, newly marrieds got 1,000 toasters. People dressed up in black tie. And Howard Cosell over at, I think it was it ABC Sports? He would say, well, with the chicken, the chicken liver's getting rancid. We better shift over to the wedding. He did Rhoda wedding jokes all night long because I think the women were in another room watching a second TV, for Rhoda's wedding. But it was a big deal. It was a very big deal because they'd watched her for 4 years, liked her. The show was a big hit by the time I left and didn't suffer at all for Rhoda leaving because it was such a solid, wonderful show. And Mary and Lou, the whole team of them were so good that didn't matter. But now they were happy to follow Rhoda's process and progress. And I think everybody was just waiting for that wedding.
Did Rhoda change with marriage?
Yes.
The character?
Yes, a little bit, and to the writer's dismay. It got to be the second year, Sadie, married lady, which even with all the feminism stuff we'd gone through, that being married was equated as success for women. And that without it, you weren't quite there. So suddenly this, as I said earlier, victorious loser was this winner. And they found themselves doing all these Julie shows. And I said, well, that's okay. And Jim said, no, it's not. I'm sorry, that's me. Oh, gosh.
Rhoda changed through the course of the show, Rhoda the character.
Yes.
Did your feminism begin to influence Rhoda the character as well?
I think early on it did. there was this whole feeling in the country. I mean, it was quite on everyone's in everyone's face and mind, and that women were moving into new areas, and there were a lot of battles which are still to be won, such as the Equal Rights Amendment. Hope to see that in the Congress before I go. But I think I had a sensibility about it because I was politically involved, and I was doing lots of work for the Equal Rights Amendment and for the Rape Treatment Center and other organizations that were not so much political as social advancement, and you could call it political, but not, although I did work for Bala Abzug's campaign. She was great congresswoman with the hats and wonderful. Talk about a New Yorker. There was an accent and a half. The Battling Bella, she was great. But I guess, and Treva and other female writers were there, and the guys were there, and they were very open. They were young guys in their 30s, and they got it as not a terrible threat to male supremacy. They thought it would be a better world. And they were writing a show about young women as well as the guys. So I think it maybe came in. I remember specifically Treva Silverman talking about being in the writer's room, and sometimes she just would go, "Ugh," because it was so much testosterone. And a joke like Ted Baxter, Mary said something, and what's that, Ted? Oh, this is my book. I don't even remember the scene clearly, except he had women by BR or R, and it was blonde, brunette, or redhead, not by the name. That was just a phone number. And Treva said, that's a funny joke, but either have Mary out of the picture, she can't hear it. If she does hear it, she has to have a rejoinder. As a woman, not letting that go by. Because it is a sexist joke. A simple, little kind of benign one, but still. And the guy said, yeah, you're right. And they did. And I don't know how it was solved. I don't ever remember the scene. But I remember the conversation. I thought, that's good. That's great. And they were open to it, you know.
Mary and Rhoda eventually reunited on a made-for-television movie.
Yes.
How did that come about?
Well, we'd been talking about it for a long time, maybe a series, maybe this, and then ABC said, let's do a pilot film, but let's do it like a complete movie. And I was very thrilled to go back and work with Mary again. And it was a wonderful opportunity. And we each had daughters. It was 20 years later. It was actually longer. The year was 2000. We started in 70. So it was as if it was 25 years later, but it was really 30. And it was great fun. I enjoyed it immensely.
Was it envisioned as a pilot for a new series?
Yes, possibly, but it also was a movie special. And it was a great tune-in. I think 18 million people, which was a lot in 2000 with all the... Things have changed so much. It was used to be the big three, and that's all there was. And now there's so many outlets. So that was a very good response.
Where do you think Rhoda is today?
Oh, I don't know. I guess she moved back from. She's probably in the village. I think when we left her, she was going to be doing some. She was painting, wanting to do her art and stuff like that. But she. I think she's happy. She's keeping on, going to art exhibits. Maybe she's working in the art field. Maybe she's doing graphic design. Maybe she is, and her daughter is the doctor that she once wanted to marry. So she raised her own. Cute girl played my daughter, and she was at Barnard. And Mary's daughter was trying to be I think she was a singer, an entertainer, a comic stand-up. So it was fun. Her daughter came out a little Rhoda-ish, and my daughter came straight arrow, doctor, career gal. So that was the idea of the movie. But it was wonderful to have done it. It was wonderful to work with Mary again, and remember the old rhythms and the camaraderie and the love and the way we were together. That pair of women, each together were greater than each of ourselves, I think.
I wanted to mention a couple other movies you did prior,
Sure.
and then we'll get into talking about Valerie.
Whatever.
You did some rather important made-for-television movies. You did the first movie about one of the first about sexual harassment in the workplace.
Yeah.
You did Fun and Games.
Yes, Faye Kanan. Yeah, and Dorothy. Oh gosh, wonderful woman. I know her. I can see her face. They yes, it was on sexual harassment. Yeah.
How did that come
And it was
about?
called. It had a different name before. Oh, that was good. It wasn't bad. Oh, Joe Beth Williams was in that, and Cliff DeYoung. Yeah, it was it was terrific movie. I love that. I love doing that.
And then you were directed by Paul Newman as well in The Shadow Box.
Oh, yes. That was a fabulous experience because we were in Malibu. Is it called Malibu Park? It's up in the Malibu Canyon. There was a camp up there. And it is the first and only time in my life where I have rehearsed for weeks where we shot the movie. In other words, even in theater, if you're in a campsite, you're in a theater. You know, you're on Broadway or you're at the Mark Taper Forum, wherever it is, you have to create the reality. And you have a lot of time rehearsing it, and you simulate a woods, and the lighting helps you and all that. But you're in a theater. This was having a rehearsal period. It was in a gymnasium. They marked off the floor as if it were a play, so that when Joanne, the wonderful Joanne Woodward, and Christopher Plummer were doing their scene, I tiptoed around with Jimmy Broderick, and we stood ready to do our scene. So we were doing run-throughs of the movie as if it were a theater piece for at least a week. So there was that process. But then we started rehearsing. Actually, it was a hospice, and it was a campsite. So we were on the steps with squirrels and birds and planes running overhead a lot. Drove Paul crazy with the planes going over. And he'd have to stop for sound, of course. And we rehearsed there for a while in the actual. When we left the gym, we went to the actual places where we were going to shoot. And then when shooting came, darling, you're Jim. He's Paul. God love him. Another one in heaven. Paul would come to us and say, he'd say, Val, I'm sorry, we're going to go out of sequence. I said, out of sequence? There's no such thing, because we've been rehearsing this like a play. So you knew exactly where you were in your mind, in your heart, in your emotional development, all the way along the whole continuum of your role. So it didn't matter if we shot out of sequence, which you always have to do in movies. So a lot of times you get to the set or the location, and it's like, oh, where are we? Oh, yeah, I remember. Oh, is this before or after I meet him? Oh, yeah, okay. And then you're there, and you're out in the woods, and you're doing the woods scene. But this, to have rehearsed there, to have tried it 20 different ways, and he's a wonderful director. He was just spectacular and distracting as hell. I would be talking to him, and he'd be telling me something, and I'm looking in his eyes, and I'm going, it's Paul Newman. Those eyes. And they were glacial blue. They were blue, but warm. Isn't that an interesting... I remember feeling that. I thought they're so icy and perfect blue, like sparkling crystals, but so warm, so full of just heat. So he was everything. He was all elements in one. And so unassuming. He made the best popcorn for all of us. And then went on to, God bless Paul Newman. What a great human being. I mean, fabulous what he did with his life. Talk about a contribution. Anyway, I was lucky enough to be directed by Paul, and it was a joy. Melinda Dillon and Sylvia Sidney were in the movie, and the fabulous James Broderick, Jimmy, who was Matthew's dad. Yeah. And he used to talk about his 12-year-old. His 13-year-old. He said, one of them, he said, they're all talented, but this one, I think he's going to be an actor. Yeah, sweet.
A few years after that, in 1986, you returned to series television with Valerie. Where did that show come? How did that come about?
That was, let's see, how did we do that? We'd been looking for something to do, and Tony was we were going to go back to situation comedy because he had produced, I think, Farrell for the People before that. Or was that after? Oh, it's hard to tell. Yeah. Anyway, and Lorimar was approached us and said they had Jim Brooks. No, excuse me. Bob Boyette and Tom Miller were there at Lorimar, and they wanted to see if that would be a good marriage. And it turned out to be initially, and then we hit whitewater with a big lawsuit, and then after that was all over, as soon as maybe a year and a half, we were friends with all the people we had faced off in court. It was a wrongful firing, and we went to court and won, and we took NBC to court as well because they had, we felt, colluded. It was a tough time in my life, but it was so, inconsequential in terms of other things. I remember the day I got the word that I was going to be removed from the show, there was a terrible plane wreck at LA, people coming to LAX. And also, Joan Rivers' husband had just killed himself, Edgar. And Tony and I, back and forth, Dick. Tony and I were sitting we were refurbishing our house, and I was so bereft. And we were sitting there on the floor. We had no furniture in yet. They were still putting in the roof. And it was kind of just devastating. But we said to each other, okay, we're not at LAX. I'm not at LAX waiting for you on a plane on which you will not arrive. And I'm not Joan having to face what she, So it was incredibly interesting and we fought it because I wasn't going to let it. There was an interesting thing about if I were a new actress, I think my life would have been over. I'm not my life, my career. But I was 18 years in. And a lot of writers and people were saying, Valerie, difficult? What? So we went to court. They lost big time. And you go on. But I did make friends and complete relationships with all the people, most all of them, on the other side, the ones I really cared about. Tom and Bob, who were really lovely gentlemen. But we all got into this kind of, cycle of Hollywood one-upmanship.
There's a lot of different stories about what happened after that first successful year with the show when you were on it.
Yes.
Is there one?
Well, it certainly it's all in the court record, but what happened was we wanted to participate on a level that was fair, and they said no, and then finally Lorimar through Mel Adelson and our attorney, who they were friends, Bill, God, I can't remember his last name. I haven't thought about it for a long time. We came together, had a meeting, and made the commitment to go forward. I came back to the show. In the interim, they had talked about Sandy Duncan coming on the show because she had a deal at NBC that they could write off on this show. So it was in certain people's interest. I don't know. I don't know it all. I just know that I came back to work. We did the show. We filmed it. And then the next morning, and when I was they had buyer's remorse. So that's okay to do that. But then you lose a court case because of a wrongful firing.
Did you watch the show after you left?
A couple of times, maybe. I felt bad because of the boys. And I felt bad for the fans where a character was killed. A mother dies in a car accident or whatever they did, a fire. I don't know what they did. I'm not real clear. It's a long time ago. And it's such water under the bridge that I must say you have to be responsible for what happens in your life. So to the extent that I was responsible, and I think they thought they could do it, and I would skulk away. I don't think that Lorimar and NBC thought we would fight it. In fact, my dear girlfriend Valerie, please cut that. She said, Valerie, my dear friend Carol Kane said, Valerie, are you going to admit that you were fired? Why don't you just say that you quit? And I said, because that's not what happened. I did not quit. I did the show, and the problem in the court case was they had the film. So then they showed, the thing was that I had been difficult. But you can see me on stage during the night, not being difficult, fooling around with the boys. It was 3 little kids. And so, and we had a couple of wonderful people, Carol Burnett, one of them, who agreed to look at all the 3 takes of all the takes of the show. And she saw me doing it 3 different ways, kind of bland, and then the director said, "You get more angry." And they were just trying to show how angry I was during a scene. And then they saw the 3rd way, which was in between. And that was what we did. We shot it. And when they saw Carol Burnett's name on the witness list, and there were a couple of other notable people, what they would do would be, as a professional in the industry, would look at all the tape and see, was Valerie being crazy or difficult or whatever. They had to change their whole court case. The lawyers went back and then they could no longer say that. They just said, well, she didn't want to be there. And so they didn't win on that either. So, but this is all legal wranglings. And frankly, I have such respect for Tom and Bob, and we absolutely buried the hatchet, not in each other afterwards. And this is so back. This is 1980s. You know, and it didn't harm my career. My lawyer, let me tell you this little story and talk about the legal ramblings of things and what's written in the paper. Legally, it was better if I didn't get hired, because then I had a blackball grievance in my court case. Are you following? NBC immediately, when they saw where the case was going, well, not immediately, but they cast me in the lead of a show. It was called People Across the Lake, a thriller with Mac McCraney. Gerald McCraney was my husband. A lot of good actors in it. It was a kind of a horror murder thing. So I said to Barry Langberg, my wonderful lawyer, I said, what does this mean, Barry? He said, good for you in the industry, bad for me as a lawyer, because I've lost the blackballing by NBC because they've just put you in the lead. They also have undercut their own case that I was difficult, because why are they entrusting a lead in a movie in July when they're facing me in court in September? So it was between the time I was fired and the time we went to court. NBC put me in a movie of the week, in a starring role. So it's an odd thing. So you have to not ascribe so much to what's happening legally, or it was a snafu, and it was a thing that happened in our industry in a casting situation. And it has not harmed me. I worked continually. It has not harmed Bob Boyette or Tom Miller or any of it cost money to Lorimar, because at one point NBC was dropped from the case because they were not involved in the actual, I guess, wrongful firing, which the court found. The jury found it. It was a jury trial. So, and it was a big win for me. It was, but I didn't gloat. I wish it hadn't happened. And for my part in it, I take responsibility for whatever I did, or whatever I did that it was, wherever I was cause in the matter. Because I definitely was. Why? Because it happened to me. So, I'm not a hapless victim.
You have overall good memories of the experience in terms of the show itself. Yes,
I remember Jason, and he's turned into such a brilliant actor. He's just a wonderful Jason, my wonderful Jason, and Danny and little Mark. They played Mark. It was Jeremy Licht and Danny Ponce, and I'd become friends with their families, and I remember it with warmth and heart. And I remember Bob Boyette saying one of the funniest things. There was a point in the comedy world, I think it was the early 80s or something, and they called things not a comedy, but a warmedy. I mean, it was warm and you smiled and it wasn't funny. And I remember Bob Boyette saying about one particular show, it's a lookity warmity. And I always thought that was fabulous, because the idea of a warmity is stupid. It's called, you don't have to get big laughs, because big laughs are hard to write. hard to perform and hard to deliver. They just are. It's like Edmund Gwynn, the famous old man who played Santa in Miracle on 34th Street. He was dying on his deathbed, and someone said, it's difficult to die, isn't it? And Edmund is supposedly to have said, playing comedy is harder. So it's not any crapshoot, and it's difficult to write, and it's that's why I have such respect for the writers of Mary and Rhoda and all the great shows that are out there. But I remember Bob saying that, and I remember many things. He was a funny, wonderful guy, and Tom was just so in love with the industry, and they created Happy Days. I mean, they were in the forefront of that. They were just terrific men, and I love them, and I love them now. And that was something that happened.
You went on to do 2 other series.
Also, winning helps. I don't know how I would try. You know what? I have to say that I would have reached out anyway, and because when I was fired before, I saw Herb Gardner. I was fired from a play that I was doing, and he put his love of his life, Marlo Thomas, into the play. And nothing against Marlo now, but I remember seeing him at the Russian tea room, and I walked by him, and I saw him get all nervous and tense, and I sat with I said, Mom, I have to do something. I went over to him. I said, excuse me, you're sitting with Gil Cates, who later cast me in a movie. I said, Herbie, I don't want to see you nervous and jerky and sweating because you feel you fired me and I'm angry. I'm not angry. Life has a way of doing what it does. And when one door shuts, 15 open. And I just did it, not out of any, I guess because I had taken the S training. And that was it was called, take responsibility for your life and forgive people. Don't, hold on to stuff. So I said that to him, and he said, oh my God. And I did the same thing with Danny Thomas. We were on some anniversary, the 60th anniversary show. We were all in black and white, the women in gowns on those graduation stairs, all of us. And Danny it was there. And I went over to him and I said, I just saw Marlo in her version of it, It's a Wonderful Life. She played the Jimmy Stewart character. I said, it was just terrific. And I said, he said, oh, Valerie, call her. He said, that's great. I said, I have no bad feelings. I said, that's show business. That's what happens. It happens to people, and the best of us. It's not a reflection on your talent or who you are as a human being. So I think that's where I was with Valerie, and with that whole process. And you know what? I adopted that year my 4-year-old daughter, who's now 25, and I had a lot of time with Christina that I might not have had. Were I doing the Valerie show? Isn't that interesting? I mean, I didn't plan it. I didn't think of it. Somebody mentioned that in some writings. Oh, she wanted to be at home with her daughter. I didn't even think about it. But in retrospect, it was a good thing.
The 2 series you did called The Office and City.
Yes.
Weren't as successful?
Oh no, they were not picked up. I loved doing both of them. The Office with just wonderful Deborah Jo Rupp and all these wonderful actresses. We had a ball, and Jay did the pilot. He wrote the pilot. I mean, directed the pilot. Jay Sandrich directed that pilot and was wonderful. And we had a good time on that. I think we did 13 or something, but it didn't. But these were all on the air series. I did one pilot that didn't get to the air with Ron Liebman. It was a very funny show. And then, City, that was a great story because that was the fabulous Paul
Haggis.
Sorry. Paul Haggis, of course.
Actually, we're going to switch.
Good.
Loads.
We'll talk about Paul Haggis